let's talk about one element of sort of, I don't know, is it libertarianism? Perhaps, maybe on some level. I don't know. It is certainly, in American politics, it certainly has a strain. The gun nut is very often espousing Rand Paul-esque libertarianism. This has been quite a couple of weeks. And I know that you were down at the NRA, weren't you? Was it this past week or the week before, I guess?
This past Sunday, actually.
Oh
I got the
gosh.
pleasure of taking a road trip. From where I am, Indianapolis is only about an hour and a half. So I drove on over to see my friends at the NRA convention.
They must be so happy to see you, Cliff.
They really must. I was wondering how it would go down. My wife was a little scared for my safety, understandably. I thought, inside the hall there's actual police, and they don't actually allow concealed carry of loaded weapons because even the guys who run the NRA know that the guys who are in the NRA are full of shit about that making things safer. But it's true. And the thing is that I wasn't worried that I'm famous and anybody's going to know my name. But I have written a lot of negative things and said a lot of negative things about them, and I was there covering it for the Daily Beast, and so I had a Daily Beast press pass on. And they very easily could, so I figured somebody could Google my name in Daily Beast and well, probably things that aren't so good about the NRA would come up. So that could have happened. But nobody assaulted me, thankfully, although they did assault my sense of American values and my olfactory system.
Well, there you go. And so, let's talk about this. We've talked obviously about what has happened in Georgia since their law has passed. The stories of a guy walking around a park where kids were attempting to play a baseball game, and they were essentially terrorized by this guy.
Who just said, I have a gun and it's legal, and he's so dumb that the law doesn't even go into effect till July 1st. But see, that's kind of the point here, is it emboldens people like that moron.
Yes, I think that's actually even more so, that's even more problematic. You're going to get a lot of these people who are just going to go out to do it because they can now.
Well, the same people that sort of come and attack you or me or other folks on the internet, on the intertubes, or really places like Twitter, for expressing progressive values, and you have them, I'm sure, pop up in your timeline. I have them in mine, who just come and try to insult you and usually end up making me laugh, especially when I wrote this piece. It happened. But they do that because, out of some sort of emptiness in their own souls. And now you're talking about these guys with guns who can show up to churches and little league games, preschools, and do the same damn thing, and basically taunt people and say, I have a gun and you can't stop me like this guy. And the even more, as ridiculous, not more ridiculous, because nothing's more ridiculous than that, as ridiculous is that the shooting that happened in Kennesaw, Georgia, the same week, I'm sure culture, again, not emboldening anybody, which injured, as far as I know, I don't think anyone's died from it yet, but injured 6 people, a mass shooting. And Kennesaw, Georgia, for people who don't know, is one of those towns in the United States, of which there are a couple, that requires everybody to own a gun. So the whole more guns make you safer, if the country of Yemen and Afghanistan were not enough to prove that in Somalia that's a load of crap, and the much higher gun violence rate in the South versus the North of the United States, for example. But if all of that wasn't enough to convince you, the fact that everybody has a gun in Kennesaw was not enough to stop this guy from strapping bullets across his chest, as it said, like Rambo, essentially, and showing up with an assault weapon and shooting people.
And to be fair, the gun ownership rate there is only about 50% relative to what is mandated. They don't enforce the law, but that's at least 15-20% higher than the average gun ownership rate. And the bottom line is,
it's also not one big gun-free zone, which is what these people act like.
Exactly. In fact, it's the opposite, right? I mean, if the theory of gun-free zone was to hold, you would never ever go and commit a mass shooting in a place like Kennesaw. So
right. It's just another piece of evidence, as if you need it anymore, that these guys are nuts. And which is, maybe I'll use that as a segue, if that's okay, because I know we've got a lot of topics. And, my piece on the NRA, which is we're so far received the scorn of some of my favorite people, Dana Loesch and Katie Pavlik, And who else? Oh, Cam Edwards, who hosts the NRA radio show, who I think, what's fun about the right is they kind of think that the same insults that work on each other because of their low self-esteem kind of works on the rest of us. So they tried to all question my manhood,
Right.
saying things like you got your panties in a bunch and you're a little girl. And I'm not sure, if they thought that would work and upset me or not, that, we're not all cowering under the bed, scared that we've lost our manhood, that maybe we need a rather large gun to make up for a rather small part on our body somewhere else. But it was fun. So, yeah, they came after me. And basically they did because I pointed out what I think most rational people who read this piece, people who follow this issue understand how crazy it is. But I still think most Americans who generally, in every poll will tell you, the vast majority for background checks, reporting lost and stolen guns, majorities for registration, for assault weapons being banned, for high-capacity magazines being banned, don't get, because they don't follow this stuff closely, is I walked into the Indianapolis Convention Center, and they bragged on their big sign outside, which is in the piece, 9 acres of guns and gear or whatever it was, and they weren't lying. It was as far as the eye could see, row after row, column after column, presenter after presenter, exhibitor after exhibitor, of all of the most deadly weaponry that you can legally acquire in this country, and it's clear when Wayne LaPierre gives his ridiculous speeches, the haters and the terrorists
rapers,
and the knockout
yes.
gamers. I personally like the knockout gamers reference because that's usually what I'm scared of when I go out in the street. To kind of create this fear among those in the right-wing bubble that we live in this sort of Blade Runner times or Escape from New York as opposed to what's really going on, which is even though the death by firearm rate has been going up here for obvious reasons, overall crime has been going down in the Western world pretty precipitously. The guy that's going to knock down your door to come steal your Barca Lounger doesn't really exist, except for maybe 500 times a year in this country. It's statistically it's amazing. We've been doing a number of things for that to happen. But in the end, that's not what they create here. They create a militarized that you'd better be ready because the black president and the Jewish mayor from New York, and they make that clear because it's Feinstein and Bloomberg and Obama that are on everything negative. As I said in the piece, it's 2 coastal Jews and a black guy from Chicago, what they call the trifecta, which their guy hit me on Twitter was, Cam Edwards, the radio host, hit me for being full of it and saying essentially, well, they're the 3 most high profile. It's like, really? How about Gabby Giffords? How about Carolyn McCarthy? Funny. You guys don't hold them up and demonize them in the same way. I don't know. Could it be the Irish last names? In any case, they create this world of paranoia where the black president, the Jewish mayor, the government in general, the UN, thugs, criminal gangs of Latinos, which they come right out and say, African Americans and others are coming, tomorrow to knock out game your door down and steal all your stuff and shoot you and rape your wife, essentially, is what they make sure to say. And you can tell that because when you walk through this convention hall, it's not even just the assault weapons that are everywhere, the 50 caliber rifles that can take down aircraft and the rest, but it's the night vision goggles, it's the laser sightings, it's the police vests, the bulletproof vests. They're selling weaponry of war that just used to not be legal and available here and isn't in any other Western country.
Well, let's give them credit where credit's due. The gun activists have in fact really stood up and said no to the selling of more guns. Apparently, a Maryland gun dealer who was about to sell a new gun, he is backing down because of threats. This is a guy who was going to sell a smart gun. And he literally got so many death threats from gun owners that he's decided not to sell it.
And this happened in California, too. There was a New York Times story about this I think it was last week or earlier this week. And the woman who was doing that has been threatened, too. And she's not backing down, to her credit. She's obviously got a lot of courage in the face of these nuts. But therein lies, again, the most obvious truth about who the NRA is. That it's not about hunting. It's not about safe. It's not about sportsmanship and education and safe use of guns. Because really, I mean, definitely for our freedoms, we want a bunch more teenagers and young kids shooting each other accidentally, don't we? We want a bunch more kids committing suicide. We want a bunch more people breaking into your house and stealing your gun and being able to use it. Or could it be that just like the way they oppose any laws, background checks, just like they oppose making people report lost and stolen guns and other common sense things, they oppose smart gun sales because those stolen guns end up back on the black market and make a hefty profit on the secondary market, of which gets kicked back up to a lot of the guys that originally sell the guns, the gun companies. That, by making it tougher for criminals to get guns, you're taking away a large share of your market. That by having smart guns and saying that only one person can use them, so that person can't, let's say, give away a gun to their best friend and then buy a new one, or that person can't lose that gun and have it stolen and have somebody else use it and then resell it in the secondary market. Essentially, what you're doing by having smart guns is you're saving lives, but you're dampening down a large chunk of the gun market, and that costs people money.
Now,
and that's who
explain
they're
to me
in it
how
for.
this works. What I don't understand is, again, this soft target theory. This is a guy who owns a gun store. How is it possible that he could be intimidated not to sell this gun? He has a gun store. He, I would imagine, is someone who knows how to use a gun. And so how is it possible that he's getting gun threats?
It's more if people don't shop there, Sam. It's more economic pressure than I think it's physical. I think if basically in the end, every gun, the NRA sends out their garbage to all their people and say, boycott this guy's store. He's scared he could lose a lot of sales.
I don't know. Raymond released a long video on Facebook page saying he had received death threats and would not sell the gun. I mean, the theory, this whole soft target theory is just a bunch of bunk.
I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, that's one potential. What do you think is the reason why he backed out?
I think he thought he was going to get shot by one of the freaks who's probably bought guns at his store.
I think that's a big part of it too. Yes, and having gone to and seeing some of the guys who are buying guns at the convention that I was at, there's just no doubt. I mean, even the stickers they're wearing on them, and they'll take the gun out of my cold dead hands. And I mean, these are guys who've played enough video games that think that's like real life, and they're looking for a confrontation.
Right.
And we know it because it happens every day in America. It doesn't just happen with, as they try to imply, the gangs in the inner city. No, it happens with rural white guys every day, all the time, who think they're tough and somebody pisses them off, and in a moment when their manhood is questioned or whatever, shoot somebody before they calm down and realize, oh my God, I just killed somebody, because there's a gun available. And in other places, that gun wouldn't be available. So it could be a lunatic who, because the NRA has made sure to block also people's names being shared in the system, our NIC system that does background checks. So there's all sorts of people out there who are insane and and have been declared mentally unfit and can still get guns. Could be somebody who could shoot this guy, but it also could be just momentary insanity. It could be somebody who loses their temper and does something stupid. The point is that they've made sure that so many people can have guns anywhere that even a state like Maryland, who has some of the best gun laws in the country, well, Virginia's not far away.
Right.
It's just like when people point out Chicago, and you have to tell them, a large chunk of those guns come from Indiana, as a large chunk of the guns in Washington D.C. come from neighboring West Virginia and Virginia, as in New York. A large chunk of the guns are making their way in from Pennsylvania that has less stringent laws, or sadly, Ohio in the northern part of the state. It's not tough to get guns in. And so that's the problem here, is that you could say, well, Montana, you can have your own laws if you want, but to take a phrase and sort of change it a little bit, what happens in Montana doesn't stay in Montana.
Right.
Or in Mississippi. So when they act like, well, and just to end this segment, I know you want to move on to other stuff, but to end where we started, when you said, is this a form of libertarianism? It is Rand Paul's libertarianism, which is really, being a neo-Confederate. It's not libertarianism. It's radical states' rights nihilism is what it is. That I have the right to whatever I want, and our state does, and you don't get to come tell us what we have to do to protect other states, which, you might have a point if it weren't for the fact that what you do in your state always crosses state lines.